Before I begin today's video, I want to give a brief disclaimer. For this video, I am going to be making the very bold assumption that you have already beaten Xenoblade 3's main story. The reason why I say that is that a handful of the collectibles that you'll be needing to craft the gems we'll be talking about today are only available in the final area or having access to the final area. The reason why it's also a good idea to beat the game is that we're going to be talking about endgame or post-game progression, and naturally it follows that in order for you to do that, you're going to need the best items available with the best attributes in the game. So you guys have been warned, there will be some location spoilers. I won't be spoiling anything about plot too much as far as I'm aware. So yeah, if you guys haven't beaten the game, be sure to do so and come back here and let's get started on the grind. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Horrors Beyond All Human Comprehension. That's right, we're talking about the gem grinds. Gems, the truly outrageous attributes that come with a tier 10, and it's going to require a lot of patience and a lot of foreknowledge about where to farm all the necessary collectibles. One thing I want to point out is that for those of you guys that are unfamiliar with how the collectible system works, every single category or race of enemies has two collectibles attached to their respective drop list, and on those particular drop tables there is the money, the accessories, and then the two collectibles which are necessary for crafting gems. Out of those two particular collectibles, there are going to be three tiers of rarity, starting from common, which is the lone white symbol, rare, the two yellow symbols, and then finally legendary, represented by three purple symbols. The nice thing about gem crafting in this game is that you don't actually have to progressively go from tier 1 all the way to tier 10 in succession. The best thing about this, as you can see, I have the steel cleaver, which increases attack. I do not have the tier 1, I do not have the tier 2. I only had the tier 3 when I beat the game, and then I skipped all the way to tier 10. As you can see, I don't own anything except for tier 10. The best thing about this is that you don't need to have the absolute best gem setups in order to farm or to even get yourself started on this gem grind. And the best part about this too is that this is going to benefit you in the long term when you have access to pretty much every option necessary for whatever build you are planning on exploring as you go about working on post-game content and also preparing for the eventual challenge mode DLC that is on the horizon at the time of recording. So like I said, you don't need to do it in progression. Generally speaking, it's perfectly fine if you want to go straight from 1 to 10. You don't even need to have too many upgrades if you want to beat the game, unless of course you're playing on hard mode, but that's a whole other story. Also, I'm going to be making the assumption that you guys are either above level 80, which is fairly simple to do, but if you guys aren't, it's still entirely possible for you to farm up any of the enemies that are above that level. Get yourself some levels packed in. I think generally speaking though, level 99 is a good place to start, but by doing this gem grinds, we're fighting against a lot of uniques, and there's a lot of experience and class points that you can get on the way. Now, going over quickly with how the collectibles works as well, is that similarly to Xenoblade 2, the best way to get items is to constantly shake them down during battle. In Xenoblade 2, they had the smash, but in this case, smash works differently. Now it's all about the burst reaction combos. Burst reactions, for those of you guys that don't know, you start things off with the break, hit them with a topple, go for the daze, and then go with a burst, and that's going to cause them to drop several items for you to collect. And if you can compile this or combine this with food buffs that give you more enemy drops with Manana's cooking, you will be able to get a fair amount. I would recommend for enemies that are below level 70 to fight them on hard mode. On hard difficulty, it is entirely possible to increase the HP of the enemies. The more HP an enemy has, the more you'll be able to shake them down. So generally speaking, what you want to do is switch over to hard if you can. If you're feeling confident in that, that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with dropping it down to normal or even easy, especially if you're fighting against enemies that are above level 90. Easy might be the way to go, especially if you don't have any great accessories or gems lined up on the particular grind that you're on. Generally speaking though, I like to do things on hard difficulty. Now, going over to the character builds for achieving the ends of constantly inflicting daze repeatedly on these enemies, what I have over here is going to be Noah as an ogre. The Ogre is a very, very good class for doing reaction combos, and the reason why is because he has the class skill called Fury Smash, which increases the success rate of your breaks. This is very, very good, especially for higher levels enemies which have a decent amount of break resistance. You're definitely going to want to have that. Another thing that you may want to get as well, which would be a very, very good idea for quality of life purposes, is Positioning Pro. You can get this from the Full Metal Jaguar class. This gives you another positional art by an increase of 1, meaning that you can have more positional arts on your loadouts, and most of the positional arts have to do with the reactions. Generally speaking, for your party, you want to have at least 2 to 3 reactions per party member, and the reason why you want to do that is you want to make sure that you can consistently have a day's burst combo going on. So what I have for my current party setup right now, I have Noah as an Ogre, like I said. The good thing about the Ogre is that it is a Agnesi class, meaning that your master skills will be Kavesi. And as you can see over here, the Kavesi classes are all reactions, as you can see. There is Flashback from the Yumsmith. This is going to be your primary break. Shield Bash from the Guardian Commander for the topple, and then Myopic Screen from the Gunner, which gives you the daze. And all that we need to do with that is wait for the other party members to inflict a Way Home. In this case, it's going to be Taion, Uni, or Lance. They all have Way Home, which you get from the Troubadour class. And yeah, that's pretty much what you want to do. I like the idea of having your lead character having 3 reactions all in one, because if you're fighting against enemies with lower HP, then having the ability to inflict a daze within the first 3 seconds, doing as little damage as possible, means that you have more opportunities to inflict damage, and more opportunities for you to inflict more daze reactions. So yeah. Next up is going to be Mio as our dodge tank. Having a tank, of course, is necessary, especially when fighting against higher levels enemies. In this case, I gave her 2 reactions, Myopic Screen and Topple. So we got a daze and a topple, which generally speaking, she'll be able to contribute. And then for Uni, I have her as a Yumsmith. You could have whatever class you want, really, but I gave her the Yumsmith simply because there is the ability to have a break built into her kit. And then for the Master Skills, or the Master Arts, I've given her Crimson Lance and Way Home. Taion is a Troubadour. Again, Troubadour is very necessary for the Way Home. You want to make sure that you have a bursts art on at least 2 or 3 party members. And the other thing I want to point out too is that when it comes to using the arts and having it on multiple people, it's important to make sure that you don't have anyone with a launch or a smash, because those aren't the reactions that you want, and it is just a waste of slots that could be used for one that actually directly benefits you. So I gave him the Shield Bash and the Myopic Screen. Again, Kavesi classes, or Kavesi Master Arts, are really, really good for general reactions. And then we have Lance over here. He has a built-in Heavy Guard with the Topple, and I've also given him Way Home and Crimson Lance for another source of Topple if need be. Now, I have Senna. I actually don't have any reactions on her. I have her as a Signifer. The Signifer is a very useful class to have, specifically because it's a great way to keep you guys alive. The nice thing about the Signifer is that you're going to be fighting against some fairly challenging enemies and doing very long, drawn-out battles, or you want to aim to have the long, drawn-out battles so you can have as many daze reactions as you can. So having the Signifer is going to help remedy that a lot with all the many buffs that will keep you alive and generally make the experience that much smoother. When it comes to the hero character, I personally want to use Alexandria. She has a built-in break. You can also have Manana and Riku because they also have a built-in break. It's really up to you, but I would say that just have anyone with, I think Miyabi actually, because she has Way Home built into her as well. Having any of the reactions that are built into a hero class is recommended for this particular end. When it comes to the accessories, I'm primarily focusing on Noah for this one, but this is a general idea of what you want to have. I have the Break Brooch, so this increases the break likelihood even higher, which is much, much more consistent. I also have the Glistening Metal, which you can get from the it gives you the ability to have higher daze duration. I want to point out, too, that the Break Brooch, you can get it from an enemy that we're going to be fighting in this video, so if you want, you can actually go for that one first, which is over in Echidno. the echidna section, because this entire video is going to be in alphabetical order. I also have the Gust bracelets, which will mean that the Master Arts, all of those reaction combos will be available immediately at the start of the battle. Like I said, this is very, very good for very short battles, especially because you want to have the you want to have the break, topple, and daze happening instantaneously, doing as little damage as possible, so you can have more opportunities for that down the road. When it comes to the gems, I would actually say that it would be much better to forego attack power and just switching over to some dexterity to make sure that your breaks can land more consistently. Once you get the ball rolling, it's just a constant cycle of breaking, toppling, dazing, and bursting your enemies, so having less damage is generally a good idea, especially if you find yourself farming enemies that are below level 50. Now, like I mentioned before, it's a good idea to have some food buffs. This is going to increase the amount of drops that you get per burst. Personally, I use the Creamy Dreamy Fish Pie, but anything that boosts your collectible rate by a decent percent was definitely the one you want to go after. You're not really worrying too much about XP, you're going to be fighting against many enemies as it is, so collectible boost is the way to go. You should spend your Nupon coins for this one. You only get to spend 1 silver, and whenever you fight against unique enemies, there's a chance that you're going to get a silver back anyways, so you're going to have a net gain of silver Nupon coins, as well as the various golds that you'll be getting if you haven't fought any of the uniques on this list in the first place. Now, going back to the discussion of the gems, I also do want to point out that comes to all of these materials, I'm going to be going through only the ones that are necessary for tier 10 gems. There are many, many, many enemies as it is, and even if we were just to restrict it to the enemies required for getting the materials here, I am going to only focus on those ones. And I'm going to do it all in alphabetical order, starting from the letter A. The only exception to this is going to be when we fight against the Kavesi Levnesses. Everything from the Kavesi Levnesses, so let's just say the Gastrades, or we're going to have the Velites, or the Speculatus, all of those ones that you find in like Keves Castle or in the general vicinity of Keves Castle are all going to be filed under the letter L for Levness, and then whatever the title of them is in alphabetical order from that point, because those are the primary Levnesses that I think that everyone should all get in relatively the same area, same amount of time, get yourself familiarized. Most of the challenge of farming for the collectibles in this game, in my opinion, is just knowing where to go beforehand, so hopefully today's video will help you guys out with that. Getting to know where they are immediately is going to save you a lot of time, especially if you have Manana's cooking and you don't want that buff to go to waste. You want to make sure that you can get things there immediately and have a game plan right off the bat. So, without further ado, let's begin the list, starting from the letter A. I'm going to try to segment this video into all the letters of the alphabet. If there is a specific enemy that you were looking for, then feel free to skip ahead to those ones. Check your own gem crafting charts, see which ones that you're missing, and yeah, please enjoy the grind that you guys are about to see. Okay, so the very first thing on our list is going to be the Ageshu enemies. The Ageshu make their return, their triumphant return from Xenoblade 1, and thankfully these ones are a fairly easy one to farm. But before we begin with that, I also want to point out that you'll need to fight them in the Pentalus region in the Maktha Wildwoods lower regions. I would highly recommend fighting Spartan Fennec, but you would probably, well, actually it is a requirement at this point. You need to go get Sagiri first. Having Sagiri will let you be immune to damage from the poison lakes. There are also Ageshus that are nearby. They're a bit sparse, but it's entirely possible, but Spartan Fennec is going to be your ticket because of how much HP he has. One thing I also want to point out is that the way that named graves work in this game is that you can skip travel to them, but if you give up or if you die, you will not spawn at the name's grave. You will spawn at whatever last landmark that you stayed at. So just as a safety precaution, and I'll be saying this a lot too, because giving up battles is a great way to respawn enemies, is that before you begin, I would say fast travel to the warning tree nearby. You had to go to this one anyways as a result of the main story for this particular section of the game, so it should be general knowledge by this point. But yeah, fighting against Spartan Fennec, he has a fair amount of HP. I wouldn't be surprised if 2 or 3 battles is all you need to get all the parts that you need, but there are quite a few gems that require Ageshu parts. So yeah, this is a very convenient one. It is a bit time consuming, but that's the whole point of the grind, so yeah, just get to know that. So the next one is going to be the Agnian Soldiers. I really don't have to dedicate a section of this in the video, but I will because it is one of the requirements. If you've beaten the game, you already have 99, most likely. That being said, though, there are a couple of options. You could just go to the Cadencia region, go to Thruben Harbor, the relay base, and then fight against all the Agnian soldiers there. If you're feeling really, really cheeky or really, really bloodthirsty, you can also go to the Orion Tunnels. The Orion Tunnels have some a special unique monster called the Agnian Assassins. They're very high leveled, but I mean, like, you really don't have to fight these. That being said, though, if you want, you can fight against these guys, do your typical Days Burst combos, and they're going to drop the Agnian dog tags, which, again, like, unless you sold them, you really don't need to be doing this. But yeah, we're going to dedicate some time to that anyways, just because. Legos are fairly easy to farm for the regular variants, and of course the elite variants, which have more HP. And like I said, the general rule is the more HP they have, the more you can glean the items from them. In this case, though, you want to go to the Cadencia region, and then search all the way to the right side. You had to go to this part anyways. It's the part where you have to go to the Welkin Falls as part of the main story. You're going to find a spot where you can actually fight some Eligos on the shore nearby. When you're at the shore, you can fight against the Eligo enemy that is an elite, and then fight against the lower leveled variants, and then target an enemy that you do not need to fight against, hit mine up, and then you're going to spawn right back at the Welkin Falls to do it all over again. This is a really, really quick process as far as I'm aware, and you only need to farm Eligo materials once if you're trying to go for all the tier 10s. So that's exactly what we're trying to do over here. Onludes are the next one on our list. Now, this one is actually quite straightforward as well. You want to go to the Fornus region, all the way to the southwest, over by the Salus Terrace camp, right before the Pentalus region, before the Orion Tunnels, and you want to continue heading to the southeast until you reach Orochi's Crag over here. The best landmark that I can think of is also Puzzle's Requino, which we're going to talk about later, but the reason why you want to go to Orochi's Crag is because you'll find Joyful Nimrug. Joyful Nimrug is one of the Onludes, and a fairly high levels at that as well, so this is also a great opportunity to, again, have a drawn-out fight, glean as many items as you can, and then get your parts done. As far as I'm aware, there's only one set of materials that you need to get from the Onlude race, so yeah, just knock them dead. Now, there is quite a few Antol requirements, and the thing about the Antols is into two categories, the Antol Workers and the Antol Queen. The Antol Queen we'll talk about later, but for now we'll focus on the regular ones. I would say the best thing to do is to go to Daedal Isle. Daedal Isle, familiar with it, is over by the Eternal Canopy landmark and the First Pillar Remnant. So when you begin from Sword March, make your way all the way to the north, past the Vinasog home camp, continue heading north as Pillar Remnant, and this is a very important one too. All the monsters that we'll be fighting will be from this particular island, but you'll want to sail all the way to the west, to the Eternal Canopy, climb your way up on some vines, and then go on to your way in, where you can find a lot of dark fighting each other. As you enter into the river, you're going to want to go down through here, and then make your way to the next climbable vines, and then go to the cliffside, which you will find Flyswatter Kamado. Flyswatter Kamado is the one that gives you all the Antol parts. A lot of components are actually required from Antol as well, so you're definitely going to want to fight this guy a couple of times. That being said, though, as long as you have your food boosts and your days combos down pat, then this should be fine. This guy is in his level 70s, I believe, so you're going to have a quite drawn-out battle and getting as many opportunities to loot him as you can. Now that we're finished talking about the Anchors, now we can focus on the Antol Queen, and there is one decent unique monster that you can fight against, which is going to be found over in the Double Crag area. This is part of the story that you would have to go to anyways, the Double Crag Gate. And as you make your way up, you can actually climb up the vines over here, make your way through, and then climb down into an Antol pit. Inside Spiky Aurelia, who is an Antol, and there are quite a few requirements of Antol Queens to look after as well, so you're going to want to fight her several times too. She is lower leveled than Flyswatter Kamado, so it's not going to be as lengthy of a battle, but there are also Antol Queens nearby that you may also wish to fight, not just to clear out the overall arena so you don't have more than enough aggro on your plate, but also just to get the extra materials that come with them. Now, Arachno is a bit annoying, at least for the non-queen variants. I would say you would have to go to the Fornus region and then fight Unobtrusive Liggy, which you can find near Colony Iota. Now, going over to the map here, and basically you want to head south from Colony Iota. So basically, for general frame of reference, you have the Dees Arch. Already recruited Alexandria, as you can see in this video, I've already done that. But yeah, you want to make your way through, up the hill, and then towards the cliffside, and you're going to find Unobtrusive Liggy. This is kind of annoying, because Unobtrusive Liggy is, at the point of the video, I believe he is the lowest levels one. The drop rate can be a little bit annoying, but you only need to get one component from him. And it is a bit rare, but you can find him over and over again. Make sure you squeeze in at least one burst combo per fight, and then eliminate him immediately. Unfortunately, this is going to be part of the grind as well. There are going to be some uniques, which they are the lesser of two evils. They're probably the most accessible sources of their respective collectibles. So generally speaking, what you want to do, and the reason why it's important to have your lead character have 3 reaction arts on them, is that you can squeeze that out as soon as possible, doing as little damage as possible, just to make sure that you can guarantee those extra drops. Now, the Arachno Queen is a little bit easier, although there is a little bit of some setup required beforehand. But what you want to do, you want to go to the ruins of Cebu Camp, make your way like you usually did in the main story, but you'll start to notice that there were some zip lines that you may have overlooked your first time here in the main story, since you didn't have the ability to access them. So over by where the Raucous Ron is, the unique monster surrounded by some water, you can actually go to the zip line here, make your way through, go on the zipline again, and then jump off prematurely to encounter Gracious Titania. Gracious Titania is the unique for Arachno Queen, and she has a generous amount of HP as well, which is going to go a long way, and thankfully there aren't too many Arachno Queen parts or components that you'll be needing to get all the tier 10 gems. So yeah, farm this one, and then leave it alone forever. Now, in terms of Arden materials, there are actually 2 subspecies of Arden that you'll want to be focusing on, especially for the Steelbreaker. That requires a unique Royal Arden horn. But before we get to that, I want to talk about the standard Ardens first. Now, there is actually a unique monster that you could go after, which is located in the Fornus region again. You may have already encountered this one, it's like level 20, and the reason why I don't want to recommend this one is because it's actually quite weak. I wouldn't recommend fighting against this one if you can't be bothered to do it. It is Perspicacious Oldar, and this is a level 20 unique. It does drop the full-bodied Arden meat that you will be needing in one specific instance, I believe. That being said, though, because it's so low levels, it dies very, very fast, and I believe the drop rate isn't so good either. So the best alternative that I can think of is going to be over in the Cadencia region. Over in the Cadencia region, you want to make your way towards Agnes, and in Agnes Castle, there is the Mulus Depot. Over at the Mulus Depot, you can make your way to the right and fight against the Rampaging Arden. There are a few elites, and I believe some unique, well, there's no uniques, but there are the elites. You want to fight against all of them. You want to target an unrelated hit, give up, and then you can restart it all over again. There is a fair amount of legwork involved, but thankfully, it's not as bad as it probably could have been. I believe there's a grand total of like 3 that you can fight against, one of which an elite variant of the Rampaging Arden. It is kind of a grind, but like I said, if you have a collectible boost with your food, then it should be okay, and you will be able to do this sooner rather than later. Now, I already did mention that you get the Royal Arden horns. This is especially important if you're trying to get the Steelbreaker rank 10. The reason why is because you'd actually need to fight against the super, or at least the super boss before he becomes the super boss, which is Kilocorn Grandeps. Now, I did mention earlier in the video, but it's worth repeating if you guys just skipped ahead over to this one, but Kilocorn Grandeps being the super boss, he actually has a lot of HP. Even on easy mode, he has comparable HP to things that are on hard mode, so you would be forgiven to bump down the difficulty just for the ease of farming this guy, give yourself some more damage, and then fight this at another time at your own leisure. The other reason why it's a good idea to also start off with Steelbreaker is because he does drop accessories that increase the duration of your reactions, which will make this general grind a lot more quality of life friendly. So yeah, Kilocorn Grandeps, you're going to fight this guy for the legendary version of the Royal Arden horns, and the accessories are also a good bonus. I would say, honestly, I would prioritize getting Steelbreaker just because Steelbreaker is so universally beneficial beneficial because it's just straight up attack damage. Everything revolves around damage as far as I'm concerned, and this is the best way to start your general progression. But yeah, Killicorn Grandeps, you'd be forgiven for bumping it down to easy mode just because he has so much HP as it is. And because he has so much HP, if you fought this guy on normal or hard, you'd probably get the entire grind done for his components. And thankfully, the Royal Ardenhorn is the only component that you need from this guy. And it's the only one that is required as far as just getting all the tier 10s for the Royal Ardens. So, yeah, you only need it for the Steelbreaker, and that's pretty much it. And you can just come by and fight this guy later at your own leisure. Aspar enemies, little rattlesnakes, are probably a very obvious choice, but you want to go over to the Cadencia region, and you want to head over to Jealous Mizrael. Jealous Mizrael you'll be able to find north of the relay base that you have to go to in the main story. Head over to the relay base, or the Thurbin Harbor, make your way up north until you find Jealous Mizrael. This is a really, really good spot, just because this particular boss has a fair amount of HP, not particularly dangerous, and the thing about the Aspars is that similarly to the Killicorn Grandeps, is that you only need one component from them in order to get all of the tier 10s, there's only one tier 10 gem that requires Aspar parts, so this grind will be over much, much sooner than you would expect. Following that up is going to be the Blunt. Now, the Blunt is a bit of a tricky one because this is actually a surprisingly dangerous one, despite being a harmless plant. So what you want to do is go to the Maktha Wildwood, the lower levels, and you want to head towards the Cave of Origin mini-dungeon. Over in the Cave of Origin, you're going to find Gorgeous Mandora, and the Gorgeous Mandora is surrounded by Blants. If you don't have Sagiri unlocked, I would recommend doing that first, because it gives you immunity to the poison water, and then the actual boss fight itself is surprisingly dangerous. So what I would be doing is I would say that you would probably want to kill off Mandora first, just so you have the tombstone saved. If you want to drop down the difficulty to easy, that's kind of what I've been doing, just so I have the landmark registered. Then clear out all of the smaller plants, or the smaller Blants, and the materials from them, and then finally fight against Gorgeous Mandora. This particular enemy is level 97, so it has a lot of HP, so this particular grind, again, there's only one gem, I believe, that has Blunt materials as a requirement for crafting them. So this fight, it's really, really painful, but it's over before you know it, and you'll find that this is a recurring theme for several of what we're going to be fighting against. So, yeah, good luck, have fun. Having a Signifer is very, very good for this as well. And also, I probably should mention that when you're up against the very difficult enemies on hard mode, I get that the idea is supposed to be that you want to have as much HP as possible for your enemies, but one thing you may also want to consider as a trade-off is that you want to switch over to Ouroboros sometimes at level 3 Interlink, and then get the breaks ready, use the break from Noah's Ouroboros, switch over to Mio, wait for the topple, then use the Daze, and switch back to Noah, and keep that chain going on. You'll get a lot of Daze burst combos really, really fast as a result of that, but the trade-off is that the enemies will also die that much quicker. It's of less consequence in regards to dangerous enemies like Gorgeous Mandora, but the good thing about going for bursts is that you're going to prevent them from having Rage Mode, and as we all know, Rage Mode is what gives them a higher frequency of attack and more general damage. Next up on the list is going to be the Brog enemies, the famous frog-looking guys, and you're going to find them over in the Fornis region. Over in the Fornis region, you'll want to head to the Ruthless Grokken, and that is below the Killifor's landmark. I believe the other nearest landmarks are the Igno Viaduct and Maglia Lake. Yeah, this is like several places that you would have had to go to. Just drop down through the river, there's several bodies of waters, you have to go to the LC spout for the main story anyways, so yeah. This is going to be Ruthless Grokken. A frog is just going to appear as soon as you approach this area. Now this one is a fairly straightforward, albeit quite challenging fight, due to the fact that this boss is in the level 80s, therefore has a lot of HP, and also a decent amount of damage. He has an ability called Sumo Press, which inflicts break on your entire party. So if you see that you're trying to attempt to break yourself, it's a good idea to wait for him to do the Sumo sumo press. He usually does this depending on how far along the fight is going. He'll do it in rapid succession, one after the other, so I would recommend waiting until you're 100% sure he's done so that you don't accidentally get interrupted while he does another sumo press and you end up losing the cooldown. Other than that though, this is a fairly high HP boss, all things considered, and you only need one broad component to get the tier 10 gems, so have fun farming, let's get started. Next is going to be the bunnets, and you're going to find them once again in the Fornis region. At the beginning of the video, we started off at the Salos Terrace camp. All you gotta do is make your way to the southeast towards the Pentelis region, and you'll find Puzzled Requino. The nearest landmark is going to be the Orochi's Crag, where we had to fight against Joyful Nimrug, the Anlud, but we're going to be focusing on Requino because this is a bunnet. The bunnet is surrounded by several smaller, weaker versions of it as well, so there is plenty of opportunities for you to pick up the stragglers, get some extra parts as it is, and also plenty of opportunities to fight and daze Puzzles Requinu for his own components. And because of this, there is only one component that you'll need from bunnets anyways, so this particular grind isn't going to last you long. The Camille enemies are a little bit trickier. There is one unique Camille in the entire game, and it's extremely low levels, and the drop rate isn't that great for the material that you're looking for. So, in my opinion, the best alternative is to go to the Cadencia region, where we will be on a route that will let us fight against two elite Camilles. You'll actually find this on the Predator's Paw. For points of reference, all you gotta do is go to the Relay Base Bridge or the Thruben Harbor, make your way to the east, past the Anu Shoals camp, and then towards this shore. Once you end up on the shore, climb up the ramp, make your way across like usual. You'll notice the Camille's on the way here, but you want to unlock this landmark so you'll respawn here when you're trying to quit out and respawn the enemies. Now, this particular route is fairly simple. You fight against the two Camilles, you get them with your daze combos, and that's all you really have to do. You only need one component from the Camilles in order to make the tier 10 gem that corresponds to it. Caterpillar enemies are another example of a unique monster that's too low leveled with a very poor drop rate for legendary materials. So the best idea that I can think of is going to be the Cadencia region. Head your way over to the Daedal Isle. Over in the Daedal Isle, as you might have remembered, you gotta zipline your way inside, then when you're in the body of water, make your way to the southeast, and then climb up the climbable wall, drop yourself down, and then head to the 5th Pillar Remnants. This is going to be your respawn point on the Daedal Isle, and every time that you spawn here, you're going to jump off this cliff, land, fight against the two elite Caterpiles, and then use the last Caterpile to give up and respawn all the enemies, and you'll warp back here. This is going to be a fairly simple one. It's not as bad as it probably could have been. You only need one component from Caterpiles for the tier 10 gem, so yeah, get that out of the way and move on. The crust-tip enemies will form a sort of exception to the rule that the Etia region uniques are very weak. This one, it's not the strongest unique you'll ever see, but that is going to be well-plated Zelinka in the level 40s. A fair amount of HP, but as long as you have decent break reduction, you're going to be able to hit it as best as you can with your Daze Burst combos. One other thing I want to point out too, you may wish to, if you're going to be playing as an ogre to initiate breaks, you may want to take the high voltage art. The high voltage art is going to work as a sort of auto balancer if you don't want to sacrifice one of your accessory slots to accommodate an auto balancer. That way your attacks will be able to go through, they won't be blocked, and you'll still be able to land a potential break. In order to reach well-plated Zelinka, you should go to the Shark Jaws Cape, this is towards the beginning of the game, and make your way into the body of water, and you'll find a tunnel. You may have already seen this before if you like to explore in the early game. You probably would have avoided this due to the fact that the enemies are higher levels than what you were used to at the time. But make your way through the pathway and you'll find a giant crust tip, farm up this one, and you are good to go. Next up on the list is going to be the Darbus materials. Now, the thing about the Darbus is that quite a few, I think a grand total of three whole tier 10 gems require collectibles from this particular kind of monster, and thankfully these are a fairly easy part to farm due to how common that these enemies are. Now personally I would recommend going for the unique monster in the Algaris Depths, simply because the ones that you'll find in the Cadencia region, you can farm the regular variants, but then the unique version I believe is immune to reactions, so you won't be able to daze and burst them. So in order to get to the Algaris Depths, for people that haven't done that that before, what you want to do is head towards the Kamos guidepost right to the south of Territorial Notbarts, climb up the vines, make your way across the river, then drop down into the body of water, and then make your way towards the Elgaris Depths entrance. Inside of the depths is a lot of winding tunnels. It's all actually fairly straightforward. It's a lot more linear than you think it is. And then you're going to find your way towards the depths camp. And then finally, at a very convenient spot, is Fang King Clavane. And fighting against this guy nets you a lot of materials. He has a lot of HP, he is level 80, and the best part about this too, for efficiency's sake, if you're doing this in alphabetical order, you could also score a few bonus Grebel parts because he summons them during the battle. Other than that though, I believe the Darbus and also the Drags, it's one of the few, a couple of the monsters in this game you require 3 materials from them, or 3 types of materials from them, before your journey is done getting all the tier 10 gems, and this is a really, really good place to start off too. Next up on the list is going to be the Drag enemies, and similar to the Darbus, there are a grand total of 3 components that you'll need from this particular type of monster. Now, the thing about the Drags is that you can only find them in the Mok'thel Wildwood lower region, and actually it is possible, theoretically, to fight against Dreadworm Nazunt, that is the unique dragon. However, it is kind of impractical unless you're really, really experienced or you feel really bloodthirsty. You could still fight this guy, but he has several moves that make him invincible for annoying stretches of time, and that's going to eat into the time required to do this grind. I would say that the fastest way to go about it is to go to the Spartan Fennec named grave and fight against the single elite drag that you'll find in this general section. Just for people that don't know, the way that this respawning works, as I explained at the beginning of the map section of this video, is that you do not actually respawn at the named graves if you do this for the purposes of giving up in a battle to respawn the enemies on the map. What you need to do is first warp to the warning tree. Theoretically, you could also do this anywhere else, but this is the closest one, and therefore it takes the least amount of time for the game to load. You want to go to the warning tree. Once you warp here, warp instantly to the Spartan Fennec grave, and then walk your way to the dragon, kill the dragon, target an enemy that's in the river, so that you'll respawn over at the warning tree again, and then repeat the process. And yeah, so the drag, there are 3 grand components that you need to get in order to get all of the tier 10 gems. The drags have quite a bit of HP, so even though they're in their level 70s, I believe they have more HP than average, so you have plenty of opportunities to keep on farming this. Droid collectibles are only found through the humanoid-looking enemies inside of Origin, and as luck would have it, there is, in fact, a unique monster that consists of 3 humanoids, and these ones are known as the Armbenders. The Armbenders are located right by the Amplifier control room. They are in your way. You are likely going to see them from a distance. There's the 3 of them all walking around together. And since there are 3 targets for you to go after, you're going to be able to get all the parts you need in the span of maybe 1 or maybe 2 battles. So this is going to go by fairly quickly, but due to the fact that if you're not very high levels or you are lacking a little bit in gear, what you could also consider is going down to normal difficulty and fighting them that way. Fighting against them in hard can be a little bit tricky, especially if you don't have the most optimized dedicated tanks yet, because you want to accommodate your reaction combos. I would say that going to normal is a fairly reliable option, but if you're willing to go on hard mode, you're probably going to get this entire grind finished in a single battle. Echidnos are the giant flying reptiles that you see over by the Keves Castle Syra Hoving Reefs. Now, the best way to farm these ones is going to be, as you would expect, fighting against a unique monster, which is located on the far southwest of this particular map, which is Blazing Carlos. In order to get here for the first time, if you're familiar, you could go to the Reef Caravan and then zipline your way by climbing up to the climbable wall, ziplining your way back, and then climbing up 2 sets of climbable walls, activating the harpoon system at the very top, and ziplining your way to here, and going up the vines, and countering this one. Now, the thing about Blazing Carlos, and this is going to be a recurring thing with basically every flying kind of monster, is that if they are above a chasm or even above elevated ground, what's going to happen is if you topple them, there's a good chance that they're going to recover from the toppling since they can't actually land on the ground. So in a situation like that, since they have the ability to fly, it's more to your benefit you try to lure them inland as best as you can. When you first encounter Blazing Carlos, all you gotta do is lure him by pressing up on the D-pad and then running towards the climbable wall without actually going on it, or else you'll de-aggro. And then when he's far enough inland, you want to hold the ZL button and the down button on the D-pad to have the entire party follow you, circle around, and then meet him on the other side, so that whenever you hit him with a day's burst, you're going to be pushing him further inland, and that's going to make things more reliable. The other thing I want to point out about Blazing Carlos is that I would recommend fighting this boss as soon as you can, simply because this one drops the Break Brute, which makes break resistance even lower for the enemies that you are fighting. This works completely perfectly with the Ogre class, so yeah, you're going to be landing your breaks a lot more reliably after you farm this guy a couple of times. Eluks are another unique monster that you've probably already encountered by playing the main story. Going to the Etia region upper, you can make your way towards the Cloud Keep, and in the Cloud Keep you'll find that before that is the Altar of Reception, a nearby campsite called the Ladras Camp, and nearby is going to be Timbercorn Cathinos. Now, this one is fairly easy to do as well. This one is in the mid-50s in terms of levels, and it also has an art that heals itself, giving you more opportunities to hit. Not really much else to say. Eluks are fairly easy to farm, and you only need to find one component from this one before you can move on. Elukas are the creatures that look like caterpiles but aren't, and unlike the caterpiles, there is a good unique monster to use for farming them, which we're going to find in the Cadencia region. So in order to find this one, you want to go over to the Thruben Harbor, and then once you reach the Thruben Harbor, you want to make your way up towards the northeast to find Wittershin's Rattler. And Wittershin's Rattler, you're going to encounter this one. It's a fairly straightforward one. The Elukas only require one material from them if you want to craft all of the tier 10 gems, so this grind will also be over very, very quickly. Next up on the list is going to be the Enpedias, the giant hulking monstrosities that you'll find all around Origin, and they are fairly widespread. Even the area where the unique monster is located, you could also farm those guys. The thing about the Enpedia is that, to my knowledge, there are going to be 2 gems that are in tier 10 that require Enpedia collectibles, and the best way to go about it is pressing Raphael, who is located in the hangar lower main gate. You're going to have to encounter this anyways as a result of, going through the general area. Most of the stuff in Origin is going to require you to even just make your way to the very end of the game, hence the spoiler tag. But pressing Raphael, lots and lots of HP, as you would expect, and a very wide open space for you to just throw them around everywhere with your Day's Burst combo. It's a really, really straightforward grind, but you're definitely going to want to farm this one quite a bit due to the fact that you do need multiple gems for this material. So get started. Now, the Ferris enemies are next on our list. I believe there is a unique monster, but I haven't had any luck finding it at the time of recording. If it does exist and you know where it is, by all means farm that one. But personally, the thing about the Ferris enemies is that you only need one component, and that's for the attack gem. And honestly, these things are so spread out all across the world that there are several locations you can draw from, and a lot of them are in very convenient locations. Most of the locations are right by a landmark, so honestly, farm against the normal ones and you're going to be just fine. The personal one that I like to use is over by the Eldritch Obelisk. For people that don't know, go to Colony Iota, make your way north to the Elais Highway, up and around, up the climbable walls, and you'll find the Eldritch Obelisk, and there's plenty of Ferrises around for you to get. Another place to find Ferrises is also in Fornus region, back over where the puzzled Requinu is. Go over to the Salus Terrace Camp, or Orochi's Crag, and then make your way to this general area where all the Bunnets are. There are several Ferris for you to fight against. Another convenient area could also be in Sword March. Not Sword March, over in the Cadencia region. In the Cadencia region, you're going to end up in the Sword Base, and then towards the gate at the Sword Face, you're going to find several Ferrises for you to find. Fight as many as you can, target an unrelated monster, give up, and you are good to go. It's, for the most part, one of the quicker grinds, despite the fact that you don't have to focus on a unique monster. Personally, I prefer going to the one at the Eldritch Obelisk. There are so many enemies around here, most of which are Ferrises, so you're going to have a fairly decent time getting that one component that you need. The flak enemies are the next ones that you'll be finding in Origin, and similarly to all of the unique monsters in Origin, they tend to be surrounded by the weaker versions of themselves, so you do not want for resources whatsoever. The first one that I can think of is probably going to be the, let's see, it's going to be Creeping Hamil. Creeping Hamil, there are a few flaks that are nearby. They're the spidery looking guys. And for the most part, these things have a lot of HP, so you're probably going to be done farming this one in 1 or 2 battles. Especially for the flak enemies, you only need to have 1 component in order to get the tier 10 gem that requires it. So it's going to go by fairly quickly, but also push comes for shove, you could also just farm all the smaller ones, or the weaker ones, the non-uniques, and get the materials from them, and yeah, then you're off to the races. Okay, so for the Flammies, I apologize in advance because I actually cannot find any unique Flammies or high levels Flammies that are worth going after. That being said though, the one in the Etia region, the Migratory Circe, even though she will die after 1 day's burst combo, she actually has a fairly decent drop rate for the Flammy egg that you were looking for. So this actually is worth going to. Just get it done as quickly as possible. You'll find a very, very quick rhythm for it. You want to use 1 day's combo. This is why it's very, very useful to have your lead character have the 3 reactions in the master skills. In this case, it's going to be break, topple, and daze. And once you get that burst, use the rest of your arts to finish it off, and then open up the tombstone and then fight it again. Get this out of the way as quick as possible. It's a really, really boring one, but like I said, the drop rate isn't that bad, all things considered. Speaking of things that are too low leveled and die too soon, we also have to look at the Flyer. And the Flyer enemies, unfortunately, the best thing I can think of is Perturbed Bilkin. Perturbed Bilkin, you pretty much, again, same story as what happened with Migratory Circe for the Flammies, is that you want to get 1 burst combo down, and then once you hit them with the burst, you want to just finish it off as quickly as possible so you can start it again. I also forgot to mention that there are lower leveled Flyers surrounding him, which, not just for the sake of getting up the extra drops, but it does thin the herd so that you'll be able to target it immediately instead of having to cycle through all the people if you accidentally target the one you're not aiming for. But similar to the Flammy though, there's only the 1 component that you need. The drop rate isn't as good in my experience, but you should be able to knock this out as soon as possible. Just do this over and over and over again until you're numb, and you should be done by the time that happens. Now, next up is going to be the Grebel enemies, and there are quite a few of them spread all throughout the world. There are a few similar to the Ferris where you can just fight against a lot of really, really small ones. Me personally, though, I would just focus down the 1 elite, and the closest elite that is the highest level that I can think of is the one inside of the Mock the Wildwoods Cave of Oblivion. So the best way to go about this is, again, we're doing the whole respawn thing with a lower level. That's kind of a recurring theme with this area, is you want to go to the Forgotten Trick Gate at the very end of the Cave of Oblivion. So starting from Spartan Fennec, follow away the path into the tunnels, and in the very first room, you're going to see a lot of those Grebels, including an elite one that is enclosed in its own little space here. What you want to do is go over to the Forgotten Trick Gate and then warp to the Gorgeous Mandora, and then as you do that, make your way through, kill the Grebels that you find here, get the elite, leave 1 Grebel alive so that you can give up and run away to respawn back at the Trick Gate, and repeat the process by warping back to Gorgeous Mandora. It's a fairly tedious one, as you would normally expect. This requires a little bit more walking than you maybe prefer, but that being said though, there was only 1 piece of the tier 10 gems that requires this. The Horish enemies are also going to be found exclusively in Origin, and the one that we're going to be looking at is Reaping Antil. Reaping Antil you're going to find over by, let's see, the Pharaoh's Arsenal number 3 gate. There's a couple of spitty things that you have to deal with. You have to reverse where they're rotating in order to reach this particular spot. And Reaping Antil, I believe, is surrounded by other smaller Horish as well, which you may want to sort of clear out before you focus on the big one. You don't want to get yourself surrounded, but that being said, because it is a boss that you find in Origin, there is going to be a lot of HP to go around, and of course, with more HP comes more chances for you to daze burst them and shake them down. Hawk's enemies are fairly familiar for a lot of people, so I would say that the best thing to do is go over to the Forest region and fight against Farseer Pertet. For general frame of reference, it is right over by Zem's Crossway, the Deis Arch, and the Precipitacious Oldar, which we fought against, who is nearby the Lin camp. And the thing is, though, is that you've probably encountered this one. It's actually right outside of where you would find Colony Iota. So yeah, Farseer Pertet is the best way to go about it. It's level 40, so that's a decent amount of HP if you're playing on hard mode, and you should be done relatively quickly since only one gem requires this. Next up on our list is going to be another Origin monster, and this time it is the Canonus. Now, the Canonus, or Canonus, however you want to pronounce it, the Canonus enemies are located very, very close towards the actual end of the game, and in this case, it is like so far in that this is why I've been saying that there's like the spoiler warning and all that stuff, because you won't be encountering this one until like the very final stretch, and that is Thomawolf Bajik. This is right over by Defense Tower number 3, and the nearest is also the upper storage tower. You just pretty much make your way all the way through, down the pathway, until you encounter all of the Canonus enemies. Similarly to all the other Origin enemies, they tend to be surrounded by the non-unique versions of themselves. So yeah, thin the herd, give yourself a little bit of a head start. The Canonus, I believe there are 3 or 4 gems. There are 4 gems in total that require components from these guys, so you do need to farm this guy quite a bit, even with the collectible boosts. Other than that, though, it is fairly straightforward. There are no real tricks. Just keep them locked down, and you should be fine, and you're going to make some serious progress when all said and done. The Kappa enemies are also fairly easy to farm. Over in the Syra Hovering Reefs in the Keves Castle area, you're going to find Craven Pigard. You most likely passed by this on the way to doing the main story. It is on the platform right before reaching the Hovering Reef camp. So yeah, nothing really much else to save here. There are many, many other Capybas that are surrounding it, so again, give yourself a small head start if you wish, but other than that, focus on this one. You only need to farm for one specific material, and then you are done with this grind for the purpose of getting tier 10 gems. Okay, once again, I want to apologize in advance to you guys, because this is Crabbles, and Crabbles, to my knowledge, there is no higher-leveled unique version of them. The best that I can think of is House Hunter Carly. You guys are familiar with this one, most likely, if you played through the game. It's right by the Alfito Valley mouth, and then in between that is the forward post camp. Inside the body of water, go into the cave, and you'll find House Hunter Carly. There are several Crabbles that are surrounding her as well that you may want to pick off, again, just to give yourself a bit of a head start. This one isn't great, but I can't really think of any better alternatives. The best thing I can think of is just fight her, get one Daze Burst combo off of her, and then just kill her as soon as possible to respawn her immediately. Sorry in advance, but may the odds be ever in your favor for this one, because this is just like, I'm really sorry. I really am. So following off of the heels of the Crabbles, we're going for the Kramit, and the Kramit is substantially better for farming purposes. What you gotta do is go to the Cadencia region and make your way to the northeast to find Hard-Shelled Admiry. The nearest landmarks that I can think of are going to be the Hermit's Inlet nearby. You could also go to the Place of Heroes Path, go north from there. Another one could also be the Thurbin Harbor. Make your way due northeast up until you reach an inlet, which takes you over to the Hard-Shelled Admiry enemy, as well as several Kramits that are nearby. This is a fairly easy one, fairly straightforward. Get this out of the way, and you are good to go for Kramit pieces. Okay, next up is going to be the, what's it called, Crodlox enemies, and this is kind of obscure, but thankfully this one is actually one of the better ones to get as far as sea creatures go. So over in the Cadencia region, you want to go ahead and look at Gyrus. Naval Gyrus, I think the nearest landmark is the Inlet Camp, and let's see, what else do we got here? If you can go to the Conch Rock Beach, that is another one if you went to Colony Mu. Make your way north, and you're going to find a dead end that has Naval Gyrus over here. The nice thing about this is that unlike most of the enemies that you'll find that are swimming around in the ocean, is that the way that it works in Xenoblade 3, it's a little bit buggy. There will be times where you're constantly hitting Daze and Burst on enemies and pushing them outside of their aggro range, and then once they're outside of their aggro range, the battle just stops. Honestly, it's not so bad if you don't really care about getting the tombstone early on. But yeah, it is one of those things where it's going to reset the HP. You could get it to work to your advantage because you're going to keep having the HP regenerate, and then you can just keep hitting them with more combos to get more items in a smaller amount of time. But it is a little bit wacky. But I'd say that Naval Gyrus is a little bit easier because his body size isn't so huge. There are going to be some enemies that you'll have to farm that have large body sizes that prevent you from picking up the items that are beneath them. But Naval Gyrus, fairly straightforward, lots of HP again, and as far as I'm aware, there is only one gem that requires materials from this guy, so get that done as best as you can. Okay, so this is the messy part of the video where we have to start talking about the Levnis. Levnis are kind of okay at some points and not so okay depending on which variant of the Levnis that you are going after. And it is a little bit intimidating, but thankfully I have this video to help clarify some of the confusion over which Levnises are which. So we're going to specify which specific uniques to go after and particular farming methods, but we have to get the worst one out of the way since we're going in alphabetical order, and that is going to be the Levnis Auxilia. The problem with the Auxilia units is that they are the workers of the overall hierarchy of robots. They're not soldiers, they're not warriors or anything like that, meaning they're only doing the labor-intensive stuff, so logically speaking, there is no point in them having a unique version of that, and so they do not. This is very, very annoying, but we gotta get it out of the way as soon as possible. So getting the Auxilia is kind of a hassle. I'd say it's probably one of the more annoying ones of this overall grind of getting all the tier 10s. But generally speaking, what you want to do is go to the hovering reef camp number 2, go down the zip line as you normally would, and this is where the main quest was, where you have to sneak on board. But what you could do now is you can go straight to the Ambusher Tyrian. This is one that you don't necessarily have to farm immediately, but you would have noticed that by this section of the map there are going to be 2 Auxilia units. Technically there are 3 more on the upper level, but the problem is though is that it is so far out of reach with no shortcuts or landmarks to warp to. So your best bet is just to warp to the camp, have this be your main return point for when you have to respawn the enemies, and then warp to the Ambusher's Grave, fight the 2 on the way here, then after you killed them, target one of the Kavesi soldiers that are nearby to reset, bring your way back here to the hovering reef camp, and then warp back again and repeat the process over and over and over again, killing these 2 over and over again. It's really annoying. Unfortunately, there is no unique variant of the Auxilia that I know of, so that's exactly what we need to do. That being said though, there is only one gem that requires you to get 30, so as tedious as it is, I mean, get it out of the way, you don't have to worry about it or think for again. The next Levnis that we have to focus on is the Centauris, and thankfully, unlike the Auxilia, this is actually very easy to farm. The only issue is knowing where to find it, and in this case we have to go to the Pentalus region. Over at the Pentalus region, you have to make your way towards the Urian Trail, and the best way to go about doing that is essentially you pretty much go about the the Urian Trail as you normally would. So from like the Vista of Ronar or taking from Colony Tau, all you gotta do is just make your way through, continue heading north, take the zip line, go all the way down here. Then there's going to be a route that lends itself to be a well, no, sorry, no, we don't have to go up that ramp, do we? We just continue on as we normally would, essentially, through the usual routes of heading towards the northern part of the map. I think the nearest one could also be the Windstrong Bluffs, towards where the Keves Castle region is. That's actually the most fastest way. I should have just let off with that. But yeah, from where the Windstrong Bluffs or the Engardo Pass camp, you had to go here for the main story anyways. You're going to notice that there is a walled off area. All you gotta do is just activate the gate, and it's going to open, and you'll find Besieger Sherrit. Besieger Sherrit is a Centurious. What was it called? The Centauris? Yeah, that's what they're called. And yeah, you just gotta farm this one, and you're pretty much good to go. It's fairly simple. The main issue really is just with all these Levnises is just knowing which one is which, because they all have names, and most of these names it's hard to match them up with how they look. So in this case, though, yeah, if you're looking for Centauris, then you want to go for Besieger Sherrit. Next up on our list of required Levnesses is going to be probably my favorite one, which is Gastrades. Now, the Gastrades you can actually access fairly easily, so after you finish the Keves Castle region, you end up heading towards your region. But instead, you would take the opposite route back towards where Keves Castle is, and you'll find the bridge with Infiltrator Garnak. Infiltrator Garnak is a fantastic, unique, generous amount of HP, and he will give you the Gastrades pieces that you need. I believe there are other Gastrades in the world, but this is probably the most reliable one in my experience. The reason why I say that is just because he's so convenient to get to, and honestly, there is no other things that would make the fight more complicated than it absolutely has to be. The thing about the Gastrades is that out of all the Levnesses, this is the one that has the most gems for a grand total of 2 that require Gastrades pieces, so you're going to have to be farming them quite a bit, but that being said though, it is a fairly straightforward grind, so yeah, definitely go farm this guy. You're going to need 2 tier 10 gems that require pieces from him, and for the most part it is fairly straightforward, and there isn't really much else that can be said. It's one of the more relaxed ones in my opinion, so enjoy it while it lasts, because honestly I'm looking through the list right now, and it's only going to go downhill from here. So the next on our list is going to be the Speculatus, and the Speculatus comes in several varieties if you go to Keves Castle. The first one that comes to mind is going to be Ambusher Tyrion. You can go ahead and fight against that one, but if you want to get as many as you can all within a single battle, you may also wish to consider fighting against the Black Triad, which I believe is located on the 3rd floor. The Black Triad is right over by the storage. You would have seen these guys anyways. As you entered into the room in the Troop Reserve section, you had to choose between either taking this path or the upper path in order to proceed with the game to encounter the Annihilator gun. You can fight against the Black Triad. There are 3 of them that you gotta fight against, and because there are 3 of them, and they are a fair amount of levels anyways, you're going to have a very lengthy battle, and you can squeeze in as many burst days combos as you can, which is exactly the point of this one. The Speculatus, from what I understand, I believe there's only 1 gem that requires it, so this one can go by in only a matter of 1 or 2 battles at the most. And even if you end up not getting it all on your first try, you could just go over to Tyrion outside, and then Tyrion is going to be the one that kind of makes up the difference for you, because that fight goes by a lot quicker. So the final of the Levnesses is going to be the Velites Levnesses, and you're going to find the Executioner bosses to be the ones that you want to go after. The Velites, there's only 1 particular gem that requires pieces from them, but yeah, the Executioners, they're a duo boss, so you have plenty of opportunities again to keep them. Despite the fact that they're below level 50, you have so many opportunities just because there's 2 health bars for you to deal with. That being said though, I mean, this is the last of the Levnesses as far as I'm aware, so yeah, get this out of the way, never talk about Levnesses ever again. Next up on the list is going to be Marin. Now, the thing about the Marins is that they are a little bit out of the way, and they're a little bit sparse, with the exception of the 1 unique, and that's part of the reason why I prefer the uniques generally, because the thing about the Marins, they're always up in the air, they're a little bit hard to get their attention, even if you try to grab their attention manually. So Dunsi Marcellus is right over by Zorza's Stonehammer, and also to, I believe, in walking distance from the Desert Faranis Hulk, all the way on the east side, and it's overlooking Colony 4. Now, the thing about Dunsi Marcellus is that it is level 87, so it is on the stronger side of things. That being said, though, because it is so high level, this just gives you much more opportunities. I would say that if you're just starting out, I would recommend fighting this thing on normal first, because these things, pretty much anything above level 80 may be a bit too dangerous, but yeah, see how it feels. If you think you can do really, really well, and you're very confident in your Signifer keeping you guys alive, then I think Dunsi Marcellus on hard mode is especially viable and a lot easier. The nice thing about this is that the 1 component that you can get from the Dunsi Marcellus is the only one that you'll ever need for getting the tier 10 gems. So yeah, enjoy it while it lasts, but it shouldn't be too long. Next is going to be the Meduse components. Now, the thing about the Meduse is that there are 2 uniques that you could potentially go for. The first one that I could think of is over in the Pentalos region, and in the Pentalos, you have to make your way up towards the waterfall, make your way all the way up in the walking path, climb some vines, then swim your way across to the Cascade Pharaonis Hulk, then drop off, go past Frolicking Parker over here and towards the Trick Door to find Phantasmagorical Wrist. This is the lower level version of the two uniques available. In my opinion, the better one is to go over to the Cadencia region, over to the Sword Base all the way at the bottom, and then make your way to the first campsite, which is Headwater Camp, and then Spectral Remy. This one is higher leveled and therefore has more HP, so I would recommend farming this one for the Meduse. You're going to be fighting and trying to get two components. I believe two gems require these particular materials in order to craft them, so you will have to fight these quite a bit. Unfortunately, they're not as bulky as some of the other ones on this list, but it's fine. It's a little bit more bearable. It could have been much, much worse, but yeah, you're gonna have to farm this quite a bit before you can say that you're completely done with them. The Merfey is also a fairly easy one to farm. So basically, when you start off in the Cadencia region, as you went about the main story, you would have found yourself going to the Vinisog home camp. And over at the Vinisog home camp, you're going to find Kill Happy Brigidor, or as I like to call him, Kill Happy Lagiacris. And basically, he's going to be off the shore, and you have to jump off the cliff to fight him, and then once you finish fighting him, then you gotta warp back using the minimap, and then fighting him over and over again. The nice thing about this particular one, and this is kind of a recurring thing with fighting against things that are at the open sea, this doesn't have the same problem like the other ones do, where if you keep pushing them away too much with days, he doesn't lose aggro, and you can actually continue the fight. That being said, though, to stay on the safe side, I would recommend ending up on the opposite side and pushing him constantly towards the cliff. That way you can maintain the fight without having to worry, and you can also just kind of stick to him to make sure that you don't lose any of the items that might be caught beneath him. That being said, though, as far as materials go, the Merfey only requires one particular collectible in order for you to get the tier 10 that's associated with it, so yeah, just keep that in mind. But I think this one also is over relatively quickly, because I think it's in its late 70s for levels, so it has a lot of HP for you to work with. There are actually quite a few Marignas to choose from when you're looking for the Marigna collectibles, and in my opinion, the very best one to get is going to be the Whirlpool Triumvirate, which is located in the eastern side of the Erythia Sea. So the Whirlpool Triumvirate is a little bit hard to pinpoint, but the best advice I could give you, if you've found the Hargan Point camp where you recruit Triton, all you gotta do is head southwest of there, and then you can also go to the Ishan Isle and then head east of there. I'd say that like maybe the closest one is probably going to be at the Cascade Crossroads, so you head northeast of there, but generally speaking there is an enclosed area that you can swim in. However, one of the problems, though, is that even though this is technically an enclosed area, there are 3 Marignas that you can fight here, but unfortunately this still counts as open sea, and if you end up dazing and bursting them outside of their aggro range, they're going to stop the fight, and then they're going to respawn themselves. The best way to avoid this is that you'll actually notice that on this particular formation of rock here, you can try to keep pushing them into the stalagmites. Continue pushing them with your daze and burst, and that should keep them locked down. As long as you're able to properly manipulate that, you have to use the follow the leader tactic as best as you can to make sure that your bursters aren't trying to push them outside, because I think if you take them all the way like far out here, the battle just stops abruptly, and you want to make sure that you don't do that. So, yeah. Other than that, though, the Whirlpool Triumvirate is literally 3 targets, 3 Marignas that are all going to drop things that you need. And as far as tier 10 material requirements go, you are going to need them for 2 gems. So, yeah, even though there are going to be quite a few requirements for crafting purposes, the fact that you're fighting against 3 of these guys all at once makes it a lot easier. Next up is going to be another twofer. We're going to need to fight against an enemy that requires two materials to get the gems. So basically, yeah, 2 gems will require materials from this particular enemy, and that is going to be the Moglums. Now, the Moglum, the ones that I can think of, there is one called Ravenous Baba Yaga, which is in the open sea. I actually don't like this one very much because, like I've been complaining earlier on in the video, is that because it's open sea, we're constantly potentially pushing this one out of the aggro range. And when you push them out of the aggro range, then the fight stops, and we just wasted all that time. The other frustrating thing about this particular kind of enemy, though, the Moglum, is that they're very wide. Normally that's not an issue, but because we are in the water, that means that we're not able to necessarily go between the legs or through or underneath it, rather, when it drops when it drops the items. So in this case, you really got to be sticking to this one like glue. Yeah, whenever it does an attack, it's going to give you a small opportunity for you to kind of go to the spot where all the items are located. I would say that the best one to go, actually, is going to be Talkative Duraka, if I'm pronouncing that right. Talkative Duraka, which is located in the Cascade Crossroads, which you had to go to earlier, where the otherworldly Rodson is. And yeah, Talkative Duraka, it's a much smaller area and it is lower leveled, so it's going to have less HP to work with. But generally speaking, you don't want these battles to be going on for too long for this particular type of enemy, just because it's going to have all those items underneath it, and you don't want to run the risk of having them expire, or it's just going to be a very lengthy affair of just trying to worm your way in, trying to get the items that are stuck beneath it. That being said, though, it's a fairly straightforward battle. I mean, these enemies have a lot of HP, so you're going to have a lot of opportunities to collect. And like I said earlier, though, there are 2 gems in the 10th tier of this game that have this particular collectible as a requirement, so you're going to have to fight these fairly repeatedly. List is going to be the Mora Mora, and this one is kind of annoying when it comes to uniques. So I did mention before, but if you're fighting against airborne enemies and you try to do a topple on them, if they're too high up, they'll actually recover from the topple before they can even land. And this is especially true if they are hanging over a cliff. So all of the Mora Mora unique monsters, all 2 of them actually have this problem, and because their attack range is so large, it's impossible to consistently or reliably get them far enough inland for the topples to actually work on them. The first one is Diabolical Rindolph. This is not worth it at all for the purposes of toppling. I mean, you can still fight it by all means, but if your goal is to go for topple days burst combos, then this is not going to work. There's another one in the Cadencia region as well. I don't think I've killed it yet, but it's like, yeah, basically there's one in the Cadencia region. It's the exact same story. It's way too high in the air and it's way too close to a cliff. You're not going to be able to properly farm the materials off of that. So the best solution, and this is actually a pretty decent second best solution, is to go to the Elgaris Depths in the same room where you fought against Fang King Clavane. And there are going to be 2 Mora Moras, and the best part about this, though, is that there are the 2 elite Mora Moras that are there. You can summon Fang King Clavane, and then give up immediately to respawn at the camp that is right nearby, and then fight against the 2 Mora Moras once more. It's fairly simple, and as far as I'm aware, the Mora Moras only have 1 collectible that is a requirement for 1 gem, so you don't need to farm them that much if you don't like to. The next one on our list is going to be the Mute enemies, and the Mute enemies can only be found in Origin, and the unique associated with it is going to be Defiled Ishtar. Now, the thing about Defiled Ishtar is that she is actually surrounded by several mutes as well, so in a similar fashion to the other ones that are found in Origin, thin the herd, get yourself a bit of a head start, and then focus on Ishtar. I believe the Mute enemies, there are two gems in the tier 10 that require components from this one, so you're going to have to farm this a bit, but considering how much HP Defiled Ishtar has, it's not going to take that long. So the thing about the Oris is that the one that I always like to fight against is Hornbow Dante. Now, I think the game classifies it as a different kind of enemy, but it drops Oris parts, and it's surrounded by Oris as well, so again, you have a pretty decent amount of farming to work with. This one is located at the Syra Hovering Reefs at the Ekdaso Verge. Again, this is the part of Keves Castle that you have to zip line out of, and then head towards the Cadencia region. But the Oris, you're going to find it over here, and basically fight this guy a couple of times. He's also close by to Infiltrator Garnock as another landmark. So yeah, this one, there's not really much else that I can say, just farm this one. You're mostly just going after a common material as well, so this should be over also very, very quickly. Now, the Autil enemies, as far as I'm aware, there aren't very many high-level variants that I can think of, but the one that I can use is the unique over in the Pentalos region. We did go over this a little bit earlier, but if you make your way to the Cascade Piranha's Hulk, you can access this one by essentially going on the usual routes after leaving Colony Lambda, climb up some vines, and then you'll end up at a lake, swim across to the Piranha's Hulk, then jump off the waterfall, and you're going to encounter Frolicking Parker. Fighting against this one is pretty decent. The drop rate for the material is fairly competitive, which is nice. It's not going to be a huge slog like most lower leveled unique monsters would normally be, so this particular one should also be over fairly quickly. Just, again, squeeze in a couple of bursts whenever you can, and as you continue on with this grind, you'll start to recognize that there are some ranges of HP where you just know you're not going to have your cooldowns off in time, and even if you do, maybe by the time you get to there, the HP is going to be so low that you're going to end up killing them trying to go for a reaction combo. So when that happens, just go for broke with your arts, reset the fight, reset the HP bar, and then continue on your merry way. And that's exactly what we're going to do with Frolicking Parker. Next up is going to be the Pagul enemies, and the Paguls are just another crab-type enemy, and there is one unique that is fairly easy to access at the beginning of the Cadencia region. So after you leave Sword March, after the harbor, immediately make your way towards the right, and you're going to find Little Fort Morley. And I think the nearest landmark that I can think of, you can either go south of the Vinasog home camp, or you can go to the Searing Strand and then make your way to the southwest. And this particular one, again, it's just what you would expect, another crab. Oh joy. But, again, you only need to farm for the 1 gem material as far as just the overall grinds go, so you don't need to stick around here for too long. Alright, so the weird one, we're going to fight against the Pepito enemies. And for those guys that don't know, the Pepito in the Xenoblade games is kind of like metal slimes in the sense that they give very hefty rewards for when you find them, but they also have a tendency to run away, and all you have is lost time. And in the case of this one, as long as you're locking them down with your reaction combos, you should be able to keep them around long enough, and in order to secure a kill, you may have to resort to using a chain attack, possibly. So, the best way to go about getting the Pepito enemies is that, as far as I'm aware, maybe there is a unique, but it must be really low levels the last time I checked. I think it was 22. So I won't do that. What I would recommend, actually, is going to the Elgaris Depths. And in the Elgaris Depths, you go to the camp, and then you make your way up towards the climbable wall, and then continue along your way, and you will find 2 Pepitos that are in your way. All you gotta do the days a couple of times and secure a kill. They give fairly decent rewards because, like I said, the metal slime analogy, so the materials should be happening relatively quickly to make up for the fact that there is quite a bit of a trek on the map. Honestly, though, just fight these over and over again, and just do the usual respawn trick with drawing your weapon at an unrelated enemy and then giving up. Should be able to get all of the components that you need. You only need to get this for 1 gem anyway, so it's not going to be that much of a time investment. This is one of those cases where you definitely want to make use of the auto-run feature, and probably have something on in the background so you don't go insane. Okay, so the next one is going to be a doozy, and that is the Plambus. The thing about the Plambus is that there are 3 gems in the 10th tier in total that have Plambus materials attached to them, so you're definitely going to be wanting to farm these quite a bit. Thankfully, farming the Plambus is quite easy. All you gotta do is fight against the unique Demonic Crenelure. You're going to find this on the Daedal Isle, where the first Pillar Remnant landmark is. Make your way north, fight against this guy. It's very, very straightforward. Farm this guy a couple of times, and, well, you're going to have to, just because there are 3 gems that require the materials from this one. But yeah, this is one of those ones where you really gotta dedicate some time, I would say. It's not quite as much as some of the other ones on this list, but it's definitely up there. Plambus and the Drags and the Ageshus, a lot of these ones have a lot of requirements from the same monster. But the good thing about getting the Plambus out of the way, though, is that if you manage to grind enough, you have more than a head start, or you've probably already caught up in terms of the requirements for the other ones if you're focusing on 1 gem at a time. So yeah, definitely go for that one. Daedal Isle has a wealth of things that you want to go for, and Demonic Crenelure is definitely one of them. The quad wing is fairly straightforward. What you want to do is go over to the Forest region and head over to the Elase Highway, and you're going to find Profound Hadzuki. So the nearest by is going to be the Visura Parkland Camp. It's also going to be north of the colony Iota. Make your way towards the north, and then you're going to find Profound Hadzuki. It's also on the same road that leads towards the Eldritch Obelisk. So yeah, fighting against the Profound Hadzuki, again, similar case. It's a relatively mid-leveled kind of unique monster, so it has a fair amount of HP, but also you're probably going to be able to squeeze in 2 to 3 bursts before it ends up dying. So yeah, have fun with that one. Other than that, though, there are some quad wings surrounding him, which you also may want to go after, but generally speaking, though, you just want to focus on this one and get it out of the way as soon as you can. Next up is going to be the Quarmu. This is a very interesting scenario. So basically, after you leave Colony Lambda, you can make your way up as you usually do. Sorry, it's before... yeah, it's after Colony Lambda. Okay, so yeah, you pretty much make your way towards the Vista of Ranar, then you go through the railing, then you work your way up the routes, climb up all the climbable walls, and you're going to end up in a secret area called the Kotz Fountainhead, and you're going to encounter the aquatic beasts. There is Dorama and Dorampe, and Dorama is a Quarmu. You only need to fight against the Quarmu, which is Dorama. You only need to fight against this one in order to unlock the gems, and there are 2 gems that require materials from this. No, wait. I think it's just the 1 gem, but it requires 2 Quarmu collectibles. So basically, after you kill the Quarmu, you could just target the Quardun, and then give up, and you're going to spawn right at the secret area landmark, and then you can just continue the fight over and over and over again. And that's pretty much it, though. This is a fairly straightforward one, too. All you gotta do is just focus down the one boss, and then once that boss dies, you can give up and then try it again, and then you're gonna get your materials very quickly this way. Alright, so I'm gonna have to apologize in advance for this one, but the next is gonna be the Ravoon. And the problem with the Ravoon is that they are only available in the Cadencia region, and they're very far between. There is no unique except for the 1 unique, and that is actually going to be Leviathan Lord Imperio. So this is kind of an awkward situation because Leviathan Lord Imperio is a super boss, and you're probably farming the gems because you want to be able to take on the super bosses. This is going to be probably one of the prime cases of where I would totally recommend dropping down the difficulty, just because he does a fair amount of damage as it is. And it's not just because, like, staying alive is so inherently important, but also it's because whenever you die and you get revived, you actually lose all of your art cooldowns, which is going to make the process of getting back on the map as far as doing your non-stop pain train of burst days combos that much more difficult to get back into. So I would recommend dropping it down to easy just to increase that survivability, to increase that reliability of this overall strategy of constantly locking them down, because as it is fairly difficult. He has a fair amount of resistance to breaks. He also is a little bit difficult to hit if you are lower leveled or you don't have high dexterity. I would totally recommend that. And the thing is, though, is that the Ravoon, as far as I'm aware, there are 2 gems that require the Ravoon components. So yeah, you are going to have to fight this guy quite a bit. Just make sure you double check that you have your food buff that increases the collectible drop rate, and you should be good to go. This guy has a lot of HP, similar to Kilocorn Grandeps. This is one of those cases where, even on easy mode, this boss has a lot of HP, so it should be fine. For those of you guys that don't know how to get to Leviathan Lord Imperio, all you gotta do is just make your way all the way to the most southeasternmost part of the map on the far side, and you're gonna end up in the Aegis Sea when you have to disembark and then swim manually all the way to the shore, and then you can summon Leviathan Lord Imperio from the tombstone, and that's pretty much all you gotta do. This is going to be the most lengthy, or one of the most lengthy components of the grinds, I think, despite the fact that you only need this for 2 gems. So yeah, buckle up, and best of luck to you for this one. Next up is going to be the Rhinon. Now, the Rhinons are a little bit weird. I don't recall any uniques that are Rhinons, at least not in my travels. But one method that I have used that's proven to be very, very effective is to go to the Cadencia region and then head towards the subhuman gutter, or whatever it's called, the subhuman ditch. It's all the way on the southeastern parts of the map. You're gonna start off in the Searing Strands and make your way through until you enter the cave, the Malevolent Hollow. Continue exploring until you reach yourself to the Emerald Font. Go all the way around, and you're going to find the Demi-Human Gutter. In the Demi-Human Gutter, on the right side of the map, before you reach the King Kings, is going to be two Marignas that are mounted on Rhinons. You can fight against these two Rhinons, give them a couple of bursts, and then target any other enemy that is around, and then reset, and you're going to start again at the Demi-Human Gutter landmark, and you can fight against the Rhinons some more. This is probably what's worked best for me. There may very well be a unique out there that will be arguably even more effective, but at the time of recording, I still haven't gotten there. But generally speaking, though, yeah, fighting against the two Rhinons here, they respawn very close by to a landmark, so that's probably going to be as good as it gets, short of actually fighting against a unique. Rogals are next, and this is actually a very, very simple one to do, albeit very high leveled, and that's to go to the Great Sword upper, towards the cavity, and then go to Heaven Razor Egreet. Heaven Razor Egreet is level 90, so she has HP and then some. All you have to do is just make sure that, because this is a flying enemy, and as we all know, flying enemies and topples can be a little bit of a finicky response. So you want to make sure that you're constantly trying to corner them into a wall. That way, when you hit them with the burst, you're going to push them further into the wall and not off of an edge where the topples will possibly negate themselves as a result of being too elevated. Other than that, though, Heaven Razor Egreet is level 90. That also means that her damage is above average as well, depending on how early you are in your own progression. So I would say that just test out the waters, try it on normal first, and if you feel confident with the survivability provided by the Signifer and the tanks that you have, you may also wish to try fighting this on hard to get as much as you can. There's only, I believe, one of the attack gems that allows you to, that requires you to have the Rogel components, so you don't have to stay in this for too long, but because this is a level 90 creature with a lot of HP, honestly, it's not that far-fetched to think that you only need to fight against this thing once, as long as you're able to get as many bursts as you can. Other than that, though, this is fairly straightforward. Just make sure you're keeping them cornered, making sure that they're not going off of the edge or anything like that to make the fight a little bit more tricky or unreasonably difficult to work with. Okay, so we have the Rupples, and from what I understand, the Ruppel enemies, there are two uniques, but the higher leveled one of the two was going to be the Petrivore Judamar. The best way to access this one, you'll actually find that it is on the way out of Colony Gamma. So after you leave Colony Gamma by the back way, you want to continue on eastward until you find a small opening where you'll enter into here and you'll find Judamar. This is going to be the Ruppel material. I believe there is only one gem that requires this for crafting in the tier 10, so yeah, don't need to spend too much time on this one. One thing I will say, though, is that the moment he appears, he's going to run off on his own. You want to make sure you set the tactic to focus attacks so that your teammates will actually initiate the battle even if you can't reach it. That way, you'll make sure that they stay in this general area, because I believe he runs all the way out to, like, right on the outside, which is going to be a time waster if this happens every single time. So you want to make sure that you keep him down. Okay, so next up is going to be Scorpox, and I'm not going to lie, I kind of hate this one. I don't know what it is, but the material that is required for the tier 10 gem that it's associated with has a very awkward and, I don't know, kind of a bad drop rate. But we gotta fight against Stoneclipper Gorse. Stoneclipper Gorse is located in the Forest region in the northeastern side. The closest landmarks that I can think of are the Ecto Hollow and the Quicksand Basin. In terms of its relative distance from the Piranha's hulk, all you gotta do is continue heading north up until you get to the northeasternmost corner of the region. And yeah, fighting against Stormclipper Gorse is kind of annoying just because you do have to deal with like that really awkward drop rate. So just keep at it. You need 30 of them, and it's gonna feel like a lot longer than that. So yeah, good luck, because you're definitely gonna need it in this case. Okay, so the Shook's enemy is going to be a little bit awkward to farm, but there is a unique monster by the name of Sea Tiger Tridents that fits this category, and you need to go to this small patch of land to the east of Agnes Castle at nighttime. So basically, start off at the funicular approach, sail south, and then northeast, and you'll end up here. Or another point of reference could also be to go toward, let's just say, like the Thruben Harbor, make your way all the way to the north, the most northeasternmost side at nighttime, and you'll be able to up towards this name's grave. You have to make sure it's nighttime, or else the name's grave will not appear. This gets into a really awkward scenario where the way that the map works and fighting against most open seas tends to be a little bit finicky in cadencia, so you'll usually initiate battle with the Shooks around here, but if you use Daze and Burst and push them too far into this direction, it's going to de-aggro and end the fight. Push them too far north, it's going to de-aggro and end the fight. And then, of course, push them too far south, same story. But the really weird thing, though, is that if you try to push them into this island, you still run that same risk from time to time. So, yeah, try to keep your boat far away. I feel like the boat might be a factor in that as well. But, worst case scenario, it's okay if it doesn't die, because that means you just get to hit it some more. Because you don't need to necessarily kill this thing to get the drops. Okay, so the next one is going to be the Skeeter, and this is going to be another annoying Etia region special. So, over in the Etia region, as you go to the Kamos guidepost, you want to climb up these vines here, make your way across up until you find altruistic Maribel. This is kind of annoying, but again, similar to the other parts of Etia region, they have such low HP that the best you can do is just inflict one Daze and Burst combo onto them, and then kill them immediately so you can start the fight all over again, and the high kill rate should be able to compensate for the fact that the drop rate isn't so great. That's really all I can say. There isn't really that much finesse about it. It's just, you gotta get this out of the way. You do have to fight it if you want to get all the tier 10 gems. There's really no way around it. So, yeah, good luck with your drops. Hope the RNG stays in your favor. Next up is the Taos. Now, this is one that has a fair amount of options available. So, the first one that comes to mind is going to be Sword March. Over in the cavity, there's going to be a lot of level 90 Taos for you to fight against, several of whom are elites. The only problem, though, is that this actually has a lot of legwork involved. So you're going to have to be running around a lot in order to get to any of them. So even though the HP is so high that you're going to likely benefit with more items from them, if you don't want to run around so much, the alternative is to go to Cadencia and then go to Daedal Isle. In Daedal Isle, there is Ragemaw Tempeldo, but the problem is, though, is that this is overlooking a cliff, and Ragemaw Tempeldo has really high attack range, so it's just content to hang over the cliff and continue hitting you with its out of reach. Meanwhile it's out of reach from you. Even though it does count as a Taos as well, I would not bother with this one. I would consider, though, fighting all the enemies around it. All you gotta do is just lure them inland, and you should be fine. There are 3 or 4 for you to pick from, and then once you're done, target an enemy, and then you're going to respawn at the 5th Pillar Remnants and try it all over again. There is kind of no other way around it. Unfortunately, this is the only Taos unique monster that exists in the game to my knowledge, so fighting against the smaller ones is going to be your best bet. And the way that it works too, unfortunately, is that there are 2 gems that require the materials from them, so you will need to invest a fair amount of time to get this done. I also forgot to mention the Levnis. There's one more Levnis that I overlooked, and that's the Ulula. The Ulula is actually very, very easy to farm. All you gotta do is make your way towards the Pentalus region, and then as you head towards the, what's it called, Engardo Pass camp at the end of the area, go past where Besieger Sherrit is, but continue on the path, and you're gonna end up to find Bushwhacker Ferret. Bushwhacker Ferret is an Ulula as well. There's actually multiple Ulula uniques in this game, but I would say that this is the easier one to access, and also it's not one surrounded by Agnian guards. So this is probably going to be the most practical one as well. The Ulula does require there are two gems that require it for the materials, so you may have to stick around here for a bit. But the thing is, though, they are common and rarities only, so you don't have to worry about trying to farm legendaries off of this thing. Other than that, though, fairly self-explanatory, and it's a very, very convenient location. You don't have to worry about it falling off a cliff or the items falling off the bridge since there's railings, so you should be okay. Urchins in Cadentia are actually very easy to farm. All you gotta do is make your way towards Bard's Mayrod, which is on the easternmost part of the map. The closest frame of reference that I can think of is either the Sea Spray Lookout or the Relay Base Bridge, or Thurbin Harbor. Make your way towards the northeast and you'll find a isolated area with Barb's Mayrod. Barb's Mayrod is an urchin that is fairly easy to farm, has a decent amount of health, and I believe there are two gems that require Barb's Mayrod's materials, so you may have to fight this guy a couple of times, but honestly, you shouldn't need to fight him more than 6 times, as long as you make sure that your food buffs are well into play. Next up is going to be the Vokoku, or the Vokuku, and this one is available in Origin. Just like all the other Origin monsters, this one is surrounded by enemies that are similar like it and drop the exact same materials, but the best part about this, though, is the fact that this also has a lot of HP, and that is going to be Desired Ururia. This is going to be located just south of the hangar lower main gate, and this is also nearby Pressing Refill. So similarly to pretty much any other monster that flies and is in close proximity to a cliff, it's important to aggro them, try to lure them inland, and then activate Follow the Leader for tactics to go around them so that whenever you hit them with a burst, you're going to be pushing them further inland. Other than that, though, yeah, this actually, I believe this is the boss that has the most HP out of all the monsters in Origin, outside of the final boss, of course. So, yeah, this is probably going to be a done deal, but to make up for this, there are 2 gems that require Vokuku parts. So you may need to fight this guy multiple times, but as long as you have it on lock, it's fairly straightforward and fairly simple to do, and definitely one of the less frustrating ones to do overall. Next up on our list is going to be the Wolf, and as far as I'm aware, the Wolf unique monster is very, very low levels and therefore not worth our attention, so the second best thing I can think of is going to be the Etir region upper. What you can do is go to the Gava Junction, and then as you make your way towards the east, you're going to encounter a bunch of wolves. As you encounter a bunch of the wolves, you're of course going to do the usual thing, where you're going to target an unrelated monster, and then give up and respawn back at the Gava Junction, and then do it again. There are a handful of wolves for you to fight against, but thankfully this isn't a super rare material that you're after. All you got to make sure is just get 30 of them, and then move on with your life. Unfortunately, there is no higher level to Wolf. There is something that's kind of similar, but it's classified as a different race, which we're going to be talking about later. But other than that, though, Wolves are fairly prominent in the game's world. You could accumulate some of these as long as you take them down as soon as you see them. But generally speaking, though, this is probably going to be your best bet. Okay, so we're nearly the end, and we have ourselves the Volgol. Now, Volgol is very strange because, technically, Perilwing Ryuho, the super boss, does count, and it is entirely an option to fight against the Perilwing Ryuho. For those of you guys that don't know how to get there, you pretty much access Cooley Lake by going from the Etia region upper, and then working your way south. And then you end up in the full region, where you discover Cooley Lake and then Perilwing Ryuho, who counts as a Volgol. That being said, though, it's very impractical. Perilwing Ryuho has a lot of resistance to reactions, so if you want, you could drop it down to easy. But even then, that's no guarantee, especially if you're very early on in your progression. Another option is to go to Cadencia, and this is a very strange method, but it has worked for me, is that you would go to the Mula's Depot and make your way to the left, go past the prison camp, and then towards the old road of rebirth. This is the landmark you want to go to, and there are going to be 3 Volgals for you to encounter here that are currently engaged in some kind of like internal turf war or stuff like that. So this is probably going to be your best option for getting the Volgal, short of actually fighting against Ryuho. There aren't any unique monsters under the same category, so yeah, this is probably the best that you can do. Thankfully, it is literally right beside a landmark, so it's not going to be as much of a trek as it was for the Ardens on the opposite side, so it's certainly an option that you may want to consider over fighting against a super boss over and over again. Next up is going to be the Varga, and the best thing I can think of for the Varga is going to be Wicked Wolf Arankui. And Arankui is only available once you enter the final area, and the best way to access this is to pretty much take the original route. You want to go to the Kamos guidepost, climb up, make your way across the river, don't drop down, and then carefully edge your way across so that you can end up in the secret area, the Fusion Fields. When you encounter Wicked Wolf Arankui, it's pretty much business as usual. This boss is level 77, decent amount of HP, and the Varga race, I believe there are 2 gems that are required, or there are 2 gems that require the materials from the particular kind of monster. There's also Vargas around here that you can also fight against, but Arankui is going to be your best bet, specifically just because you can hit him with multiple bursts and multiple dazes, and you're good. And yeah, now, here we are at the end of our journey, or at least the end of our list, which is Wisp. Wisp, you're going to find a special unique monster over by the Eldritch Obelisk, and that is going to be Crafty Anski. This is the final one you need to get, and thankfully the Wisp only has 1 collectible that is a necessary requirement for crafting the tier 10 gems. And if you've been following this entire list, that means that you have pretty much gone through every single monster that has the drops necessary for crafting every single tier 10 in the game. This has been a long video to make. I've been doing the entire thing straight away through, but thankfully we are done with this, and this is going to be the first step. On top of getting all the materials and all the experience, all the CP, all that stuff that you gain as a result of doing this grind, not only will you have all the options available for the attributes that the gems provide at the very highest level, but also you're going to be getting a myriad of useful accessories that will be helpful to you throughout your journey and as you start experimenting with the different builds. Moving on from the post-game and the things in between now and the challenge mode DLC, which is coming out on the horizon at the time of recording. This has been a serious grind. I'd compare this similarly to the core crystal farming from Xenoblade 2, where you had to fight against an enemy over and over again to get an item that doesn't even have a guaranteed outcome because you got to roll for the gacha system in that one. This one has that element of randomness too, and I would say this is like 4 times as much because there's so many things that you have to roll for when accessing the drop table, whereas the core crystals are pretty cut and dry. But other than that though, this is pretty much the end of today's farming video. If you guys stuck it out all the way through the very end, thank you very much for joining me. This was a trip, and I cannot wait to use all of the accessories and gems that we've acquired along the way in the future guide videos and blade showcases, or not blade showcases, hero class showcases that we're going to be seeing in the next couple of weeks. So again, guys, thank you very much for joining, and I will see you guys next time. Take care, everyone.